Hey everybody, how are you? It's Dr. Cruz. So nice to see you again. So today I'm going to continue to read from my book. I'm on chapter 1, and today I'm going to continue on page 3 where it says Pigs to a Slaughter. And I really encourage you all to get my book. It's only like $10 or $15 on Amazon. It's called From Foster Care to Fabulous, an Imperative Movement. And then in that way you can read along with me because this is going to be a very interesting journey that we go on together. And if you pay attention really close to what it is I'm experiencing when I read, you will see what true emotion looks like from recollection of trauma and after you've been healed. So just because we get healed from our past, our childhood, our trauma, our abuse, or whatever it is, abandonment, neglect, parenting issues, maybe father issues or insecurities within the home, whatever it is from our past that we heal ourselves from, and hopefully you can do that also here at Healing Out Loud. It doesn't mean you're exempt from future emotion. Okay, so healing just means that you've dealt with it and you've processed it and you've reframed it and you've given it new meaning, and you have learned to have compassion for certain people or for certain situations and things of that nature, so that the trauma or whatever it was that you experienced in your history doesn't control you. Okay, healing means that we get a new understanding and we have a new experiential vibration with that which used to control us. Okay, that's healing, that we have a new meaning for it. It doesn't mean that in the future, so like now that I'm reading my book, it doesn't mean that I'm never going to be emotionally affected again. Sure, I'm going to be emotionally affected. If you recall last week for chapter 1, when I read from the beginning, Tears That Fell in the Dark, I was reading about my mother, a recollection I had. And it was of her being dragged on the cement sidewalk in this disgusting, dirty, poor neighborhood. Um, my grandmother was so very, very poor. She lived off of her husband's um, death benefits, maybe. He was a coal miner. My grandfather was a coal miner in Virginia or somewhere over there. I don't know. I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York. But, I don't know much about my family from Virginia. But, he was a coal miner and she lived off of his death benefits. And so she was obviously elderly. When I was 10, she was probably in her 60s. And she was by herself. She did have a daughter who lived next door to her until she passed away. And then my mother passed away in the 80s. So my grandmother was alone for a very long time. And so she just, when you don't grow, you die. And when you don't use it, you lose it, right? And that goes for our bodies, our minds, our income, our health, And so my grandmother didn't use it. She just was surviving. And so eventually she became extremely, extremely poor. And that is the recollection I had of my mother. She was being beaten in front of this house I lived in, which didn't have any hot water most of the time. It was very, very cold. I remember my grandmother allowing me to visit somebody next door. They had a nice home. Well, not nice, but it was a big home. I don't remember what it looked like or anything inside. Maybe it was nice. I don't know. But, and I remember going over there because our home was too cold because she couldn't afford to pay electricity and hot water all the time. And so we had a wood burning stove in the living room, a very old black wood burning stove with the thing going through the roof or whatever. And so, this memory I have of my mother being beaten, it's not just that we were poor, and it's not just that we lived in poverty and all of this kind of thing. It's not the objectiveness of poverty. It is the experience that I had of being poor and of my family being poor and what that meant. For my mother, for my grandmother, I remember them drinking beer all the time. It just was a very odd, almost indescribable experience growing up. I lived there for a couple years, not very long, because I ran away. My sister ran away, so I ran away because she was 3 years older than me, and of course I wanted to tag along with her. I was maybe 7, 8, I don't remember, somewhere around there. Like I said in the last video, the memories start getting convoluted, and they're not exact anymore the older we get, because we forget some things and we don't remember quite the order, but we remember the feeling of trauma and abuse and poverty and whatever it is that affects us emotionally, right? We remember that because that's in our physiology. It has been ingrained in us and in our memory also, the feeling of what it was. So although I have vague memories, I remember my grandmother had countless dogs. I don't know, 40, 50 dogs. She would put food outside, and these dogs would just come, and she would bring them in the house. And, she was so lonely that this was her family, these animals. So anyway, that's what I was talking about last week. The memory I have of my mother just helpless and being dragged in front of this house. And I don't recall where exactly I was, but I recall seeing it, and no one helped her. And as a child, I remember thinking to myself, why isn't anyone stopping this? But I was in shock and I was in pain. I remember hurting for her, but I didn't necessarily know something was going wrong per se, outside of my instinct. It's a very strange experience when you grow up in poverty with abuse and alcohol, just poor white trash, whatever that is. That's how I explain it. It was just indescribable experience, and that memory of my mother was very, very sad for me. And so when I read it, my point is that when I read it last week, I was emotionally affected. So just because we're healed doesn't mean we're never emotionally affected again. It just doesn't control us anymore. Okay, so I'm going to continue page 3, like pigs to the slaughter. So this is picking up where my brother is being abused. All his life, and especially by the age of 12, my brother had been my protector. Today, I cannot escape the memory of witnessing these people hurting him. I can see it as if it were a horrible scene from a movie, the movie Mommy Dearest, playing continuously in the corners of my mind. One particular night, our foster father dragged my brother by his hair, pulling him up and down the hallway by the stairs just outside the kitchen. As I close my eyes and revisit that pain, I see my brother's face, pale from fear and torment, then red, so unbelievably bright red, as though all the blood in his body had rushed to his face. That's my brother you're hurting, I cried in my mind. Stop! Please stop hurting my brother. The feelings that overtook me as I saw them tormenting him and screaming at him, knowing our evil foster brother and sister were laughing at us, crippled me. Feeling powerless and scared to death, isolated and weak, I knew there was nothing I could do to help him. The painful message in his face screamed out to me. It connected to me. I was all he had, and I could do nothing but close my eyes from the horror before me. His shame and tears ripped away any of the childlike innocence he had at the time. All that remained was damaged. He tried to fight back with his tear. He tried to fight back his tears as he became a victim of the physical abuse these shameless people wrathfully subjected upon him. It must have felt as though his scalp was being also pulled completely off of his head. That had to be the same feeling my mother felt as she too screamed out for help while being dragged on the cold, dirty cement in front of my grandmother's house a year or so earlier. How could this grown man treat this poor child the same way he dragged the pigs in the backyard on their way to being slaughtered? Maybe that was the problem. Maybe they thought that they were supposed to treat us as they treated the pigs and the other farm animals. Maybe to them, we as foster children were nothing more than a different type of livestock. Could it have been that they saw us as nothing more than expendable animals? Today, I wonder how much dysfunction we could have endured had we not eventually moved. Would we have survived? Would they have eventually cut our throats as they did the pigs? I sadly remember what that looked like. A punch to the kidney. My brother was such a beautiful little boy. His smile was delightful. You could see from his physical features that he was going to grow up to be brilliant. It was something that radiated from his face, his eyes. He was so young and sweet and innocent. Why would anybody want to hurt him like that? They were so mean to us. They were cruel. Even today, their mistreatment of us doesn't make any sense to me. Their foster son, Ronnie, who was about 16 years old at the time, tortured my brother mentally by bullying, fighting, teasing, pushing him around as though he was worthless. The mental torture was so much more devastating for us than the physical. My brother, only 12 years old then, was petrified of Ronnie. He was still an innocent child just as I was, despite having been removed from his mother's care due to her neglect. He had never experienced anything like we were being exposed to in this foster home. My brother came to this home an innocent boy, but the evil he was subjected to through the actions of these people would soon change his personality forever. Ronnie and his sister Tammy were always slapping my brother in his face for no reason, slowly defiling his youthful dignity. Why were they so evil? Were they born evil? Were they just repeating learned behaviors that had been previously inflicted upon them? Was the baton of physical abuse handed off to them, which they now passed along to me and my brother? One night, for no reason, Tammy punched my brother in his kidney. I suppose my brother must have traversed a subconscious point in his mind and spirit that night where he had had enough of their abuse because he reacted by punching her back in the same spot. Only she had medical problems with her kidney, and his punch caused her excruciating pain. I've often pondered whether his retaliatory punch should make me feel good, knowing that she finally got a little taste of her own medicine. She knew, if only for a few minutes, the same agony she had repeatedly inflicted upon us. But no, it never made me happy. It was actually very sad to me that he had no choice but to learn to defend himself at an age where he should have been playing freely in a safe environment with other children. Had we all now become victims of our circumstances? Were we in the process of learning survival of the fittest tactics? Had we become reflections of the monsters that had been raising us until this point of our lives? Yes, we were all being molded as a result of the cumulative dysfunction surrounding us since birth. Nearly suffocated. There was one night in particular that probably caused me the most vivid consequence throughout my life. It was a night I was laying on my bed trying to fall asleep when, like a lightning bolt out of nowhere, Tammy jumped on my bed and tried to suffocate me with a pillow. I can still feel the panic that consumed my entire mind and body as I endured the unbearable pain of my nose being pushed into my skull The body weight she put on that pillow, which covered my entire face, felt as though death was taking me home. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear. I was in a panic, but I couldn't fight back because her knees were locked on my arms. Why was this happening? I tried to scream, but there was no hope. There was nothing but darkness underneath that pillow, and I felt my life slipping away from me. In those moments that she was suffocating me, feelings flooded through my body, feelings I couldn't fully understand, but they would stay with me for the rest of my life. Fear consumed me that night in a way I had never previously experienced. I was as close to death as I could be without actually dying. Why would she do that to me? Why did these people hurt us in the way that they did? Why did they hate us so badly? We were just young, innocent children who needed safety and love, yet somehow it didn't matter. It didn't matter to our foster parents, our biological family, or anyone else. We became the products of other people's madness. Never again would our lives ever be the same, and never again would we ever feel safe. Every moment and everything we did from there on out was surviving the evil around us. We remained nearly defenseless for many years to come. Remember, I was 7 and he was 12. We couldn't fight these people since we were only helpless children. What kind of nightmare had come upon us? Why would a grown man approved to be a foster parent drag a boy up and down the hallway by his hair while he was screaming for his dear life? Why would a teenage girl try to suffocate a 7-year-old child? Was she really trying to kill me, or was this previously done to her? Was this a learned behavior for her, or was she really a potential psychotic killer? Were my brother and I not just young, innocent children? Did we not matter to anyone? These were the questions I was left to ponder for the rest of my life. We had now become a part of some crazy existence that we were clueless as how to escape. For time purposes, I'm at 17 minutes. I'll stop there and I'll pick up at the $5 torment, where I'll talk about my $5 allowance and how they tormented me about it. But, you know, as I read this story, I understand how that part of my life still affects me today. I mean, I talk about the fear that consumed me. And yesterday I talked about the fear that still consumes me to a great degree. Like when I cross the bridge, and there's other things in my life that trigger fear, a fearful reaction, a panic attack. Sometimes not a full-blown panic attack where I'm debilitated, but I am definitely paused, as if I have cement boots on. I can't move, and it takes me a minute to figure it out. But it comes from the abuse and the suffocation. And, you know, you'll hear later when I read my book about my grandfather locking me in his home for hours after school, and the damage he has caused me in my life and the fear that he induced on me. And you know, I was talking to my brother yesterday, and we were talking about how differently he and I processed our fear. Fear for me, I was controlled by fear. My brother wasn't. He got in front of fear. I stayed behind fear. Fear blocked me. I couldn't pass fear. I couldn't get around it. I didn't know how to control it. I didn't know how to disengage from it. I didn't know how to neutralize it. And so when I later got into domestic abuse situations, fear often consumed me. But what I learned later in my life was to fight. So when you're abused, you only got a couple of choices. You can be a victim to it. You can create an hard exterior and fight. I used to carry a switchblade in New York for protection. And throughout my early 20s, slicing people's tires with a knife was nothing to me. That was my culture. That's what I grew up knowing and doing for protection. Growing up homeless and things of that nature. But the important thing to understand, and you'll hear about all of this coming in, unfolding as I read my story, because what happens is that when you grow up experiencing abuse and child abuse and neglect, and you are around fearful, intimidating people because you're a young child and you're helpless practically, right? You are helpless. I was very helpless. My brother was helpless. We were victims to our environment. What happens is that changes you on every level. You are never, ever the same again. So whoever Capri was born to be, she got lost because she had to adapt to her environment where people were trying to kill her and suffocate her and rape her and molest her and beat her, and her being me as the younger child, and her visually watching the abuse of her brother. My brother and I had grown up together up to this point. I think this was the first or the second foster home we were in. So we were still together. But by the third, I think we were separated. They separated us, and I wasn't able to have a relationship with him again until we were well into our 30s. And so that's what foster care does. It destroys families. It separates siblings. I don't want to say foster care destroys families. My family destroyed my family. My mother and my father destroyed my family. Foster care didn't destroy my family. Foster care left me vulnerable to people who abused us. And they didn't protect us. The system has a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility. When the government removes children from a home, their obligation is to put them in a safe home. And the homes that I experienced were not always safe. And this one was probably the worst. So I want to close because I'm going on 25 minutes, but I thank you for joining me on this journey, because it's a very unique experience for me to read my book on video to you all in the hopes for you to gain some new understanding about what foster care is and how it can affect a child and the damage it causes that child throughout their adult years. I'm in my 40s and I'm just now getting back to who I authentically am as a human being. But it's not just it's not just foster care. I was in the military for 20 years as well. So you'll hear about that as well. Okay. So for today's takeaway, I just want again to remind you that the responsibility of parents toward their children is tremendous. And when we fail as parents, we need to self-correct. We need to be taught. I wasn't taught how to be a parent. So I became a parent and I didn't know how to be a parent. And so we have to be awakened and taught how to be a parent. And that's what neighbors and friends are for. So if you see a young parent, I encourage you, please befriend them. You don't have to be their warden, and you don't have to, um, try to be in charge of them, but help them. I had a girlfriend in the military, God bless her, and she would do my daughter's hair, and she would talk to me, and she was a really great role model. She was my friend first and foremost. She was a really great role model. She had 2 children of her own. And so she didn't curse me out. She didn't demean me. She didn't say, you don't know what the hell you're doing. But she saw that I wasn't really a great mother. But it was because I didn't know how to be. Plus, I was a single mother shift working. So the probability of someone coming out of foster care, the likelihood of them becoming a single parent, the numbers skyrocket. Because we're not taught anything, typically. I wasn't taught self-care, preparation for employment, how to process my emotions. I wasn't taught anything about children or how to be a parent. I didn't have parents. I was going through foster home after foster home. So the parenting I knew was abuse. By the grace of God, I didn't abuse my daughter. I hit her once, to my recollection, and it scared the daylights out of me. I was petrified. I took her to the emergency room. I thought I damaged her. And I swore I would never hit her again. I don't know if I stuck to that. But I didn't hit her regularly, that's for sure. I didn't abuse her. I did the best I could as a single mother without any knowledge. I loved her more than anything in life, but I didn't really know what that meant because no one had taught me about love. I didn't know how to love myself. So what love meant to me at that time period when I was a young mother isn't the same thing as what love means to me now. So you understand that when you come from abuse and foster care or just abuse, your understanding of what certain things are is different than when you come on the other side of being healed and you learn. Now I've learned what being a great mother is. I'm going to be the best grandparent ever because I got it down now. You know what I mean? I got it. And I'm a phenomenal mom. I've been a phenomenal mom for quite some time. But I'm going to be even a better grandmother because I understand it now. I'm educated. I'm edified. I'm aware. I've experienced it. You know what I mean? But young people that come out of abuse, their definition of love and safety and health and being healthy and healthy communication and what it means to be with a healthy partner, those things aren't taught to us. We don't know what that means. All we know is abuse and survival and switchblades, and it's you or it's me. And it's definitely going to be you because it ain't going to be me. You ain't going to get me, God. That's the attitude you got to get because you become a survivor. You're not a thriver. You haven't been taught how to thrive in life. You've been taught how to survive. And that's way, 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 way different. That's what abuse does to people. It changes who they mentally, physically, emotionally, physiologically, spiritually were born to be. It damages people at their core. It steals a level of healthy life and upbringing from the child when they come from abuse. It steals everything. It steals your hope. It steals your dreams. It steals your sense of safety and identity. Abuse steals everything from you. Everything. It haunts you in the middle of the night because you're scared. You don't know if your abuser is going to come through that door in the middle of the night. It's life-changing. And it takes a lifetime sometimes for people to go through therapy. And I've spent decades I've spent decades with personal growth and development books and watching YouTubes of Jim Rohn and Bob Proctor and Les Brown and Tony Robbins and T.D. Jakes and Joyce Myers and all these people. My brother introduced me to personal growth and development books. Decades. I started when I was 30. I was stationed in Puerto Rico. And it wasn't until I was 37 that I had an inkling of an awakening where I could see a reflection of myself. 7 years it took. And then it took another 3 years. That was just personal growth and development books. Then it took another 3 or 4 years of me doing the YouTubes of the Jim Rohns and all of that. They were my father. Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, Les Brown. They were my father because my father didn't teach me anything. They were my role models. And then some other people in my life. You know who you are. So I close today. I thank you very much. Please get my book and follow me through. You can get the Kindle version also. It's important that you follow me through this book so that you can get a real sense of what it is I'm talking about. You know, you can read ahead and ponder some things and leave me some questions. If you have any questions, please leave them, because my goal here is to share everything, to be transparent and to share everything. The pain, the abuse, where was I then? What did it take for me to process all of that? How did I get out of all of that? How did I become healthy? How did I learn? I'm very, very, very lucky. There are hundreds of thousands of people in jail and dead from foster care, from abuse. Millions. If you take just foster care, it's hundreds of thousands. The number is so astronomical, you don't even know. I know we have 400,000, give or take, foster children in this nation at any given moment. Foster care has been in existence for decades, maybe a century. And then on top of that, all the other abused people that don't have anything to do with foster care. Where do you think these people go? You think they're in your community. They're in the military. They're your neighbors. They're the people that shoot up the schools. They're in prison. They're in the street. They're homeless. They're in psychiatric wards. They're probably not your congressman or your teachers. You know, these people that grow up in abuse, if they don't get the help that they need, like I did, I'm so very lucky. And like my brother, give or take. Where do they go? They don't just disappear. So I encourage you to open your eyes to the young people around you and befriend them and find out if they've been abused and help them learn how to be a healthy person, okay? Because that's what life is about. It's about us feeding back into our community. And let me be the prime example. I was so lost and people fed into me. And I am so found now. Thanks to the Lord above, right? All right. Many blessings to you. Thank you so much. See you next week.